Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I am joined by the Fungalverse champion here, Adrian M. Gibson. Thank you so much for joining me today, Adrian.
Thank you for having me. No one has called me the Fungalverse champion, but I adore that title.
I
Thank
feel
you.
like it's only fitting.
It's very appropriate.
And you
Um,
recently sold 600 books.
yeah,
That's huge.
so that was just like this past weekend, and
Yeah.
sold like 100 copies through the Broken Binding, which were signed and numbered, which obviously like
Yeah.
boosted it way up. But
Yeah.
it was really cool to be able to do that, and then hopefully collaborate with them some more in the future. But yeah, I'm just
Absolutely.
honestly blown away by how everything's gone since launch. Just very,
Yeah.
very thankful for everyone in this community.
It's been an incredible journey for you. Imagine I've been seeing it everywhere, and congratulations on those 600 books. I'm sure there's going
Thank
to be
you.
another 600 pretty quick there.
Fingers crossed.
We've got
Andrew's got one
some.
of one of the 600. Hi, Andrew.
There you go,
And Herman's
Andrew.
here. Hi, Herman. And Aaron. Wow, we got
Hello.
so many. We got so many booktubers in the chat
We
and
do,
podcasters.
yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We've got Brian here as well. And yeah, Herman and I will be chatting, I believe, at some point next week or the week after. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Nice.
But in the meantime, for those watching now and later, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and your book for us?
Yeah, of course. Um, Aaron's saying support the fungal,
Yes.
please. Please. So my name is Adrian M. Gibson. I'm a SFF author, as well as a podcaster. I run SFF Addicts with my bestie MJ Kuhn. So we're in your ear holes every week, just chatting with authors and doing writing master classes and stuff like that. We're also here on YouTube. So you can see us in video if you want to see our faces and see MJ literally like cackling like a worm every week, which is wonderful to see. And then I'm also the author of Mushroom Blues, which is my debut novel. Yeah,
There, yeah.
Kay's got a copy right there. Got it in paperback and hardcover. And I'm just going to show off this hardcover because I got to shout out to my boy Felix Ortiz, who did the artwork, and he is wonderful and just super talented, and I adore him. But if you
Absolutely.
get the hardcover, you take off the dust jacket and it's the full artwork
Oh,
right there.
I love when authors do that. The naked hardcover is the artwork or a design of some kind rather than just the standard white or black that you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just a design freak as well, because it's like I have a background in illustration, a background in graphic design,
Yeah.
tattooing. So I incorporated a lot of those skills into this book. Like Felix did the artwork, but I designed the cover and the typography. I did the entire
Mm.
interior design and everything like that. Just
Wow.
because I'm like super nerdy about that kind of stuff. So
And it's brilliantly done too, because you have everything laid out really clean. And I noticed that with your website as well. Everything is very clean, easy to find. It's beautiful. Like even the paperback, I know you have the hardcover there, but you've
mhm.
got, artwork all throughout this
Yeah.
too, right? It's quite the beauty to look at, no matter what format you're getting, which is I appreciate.
Yeah, not so much an ebook, unfortunately, but that comes with the territory. It's like you're
Right.
quite limited when it comes to Kindle and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But at the very least, it's like I tried to make this book as close to a special edition as possible without it being a special edition, pretty much.
I love that. I love that. There's a few authors who've done that. One that I personally loved is K.E. Andrews. Hills
Oh
of
yeah,
Heather
yeah.
and Bone is
hmm
beautiful, beautiful formatting on that one too, with artwork and botanical artwork throughout it as well for each chapter.
Yeah.
And Andrew, you are a gem, Andrew. You're fantastic.
I'm just the icing on the cake. I'm
Yeah.
icing on the cake.
Zamara, good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. Bo, we have Bo here with us
Hi,
too.
Bo. How you
Good
doing,
to
buddy?
see you.
The Spore edition. I'll keep things tight-lipped for now, but there's
Oh,
some good stuff coming. So
okay.
I would
Something
love
to
to
look
call it the
forward
Spore
to.
edition. The Spore edition is actually like a good way to call it.
Okay. I
Yeah.
like it. So, and we'll take that moment to put a plug in for anyone who's watching. All the links to follow Adrian and get those updates are down in the description below. So be sure to follow Adrian on all the social media platforms and make sure you're getting those updates on the Spore edition. So, in terms of Mushroom Blue, something I always like to ask is, who is your ideal reader?
I guess for me, my ideal reader is just someone who's open,
Mm.
in the sense that they are open to having an experience that will discomfort them, but also one
Mm.
that will spark their curiosity.
Oh, okay.
Which I feel is pretty par for the course with sci-fi and fantasy readers,
Yeah.
and horror readers too. So it's like genre readers typically lean towards that stuff. But even within that,
Mm.
there are people who prefer certain, more comfortable lanes and subgenres and stuff like that. So for me, definitely, Andrew saying it's best to read this while taking recreational mushrooms. Sure. If you can properly see the words on the page after consuming
Yes.
that much.
It's kind of
But
important.
yeah, but openness for sure in terms of being introduced to ideas and themes that are really difficult, but also, the both the beauty and the sort of disgusting aspects of fungi and
Right.
that whole like biological kingdom. Just being
Okay.
open to experiencing that and hopefully making it towards the end where things really, I think, kind of like blossom in a really fascinating and kind of emotional way.
Okay. I love it. And because you've talked about this before in other chats where you kind of mix the weird and the dark.
Mhm.
And in blending those 2, um, you're saying you hope readers go in with an open mind, and that's important with a lot of works that I've read. Like you said, in fantasy, you're going in, you don't always know what you get, and a lot of dark territory is touched on. What was it like for you as a writer, as opposed to a reader, and trying to convey that through your story?
It wasn't particularly difficult
Okay.
because my mind goes to pretty dark places all the time.
Fair.
Just because of the stuff that I consume, it's like
Yeah.
I a lot of what I read, a lot of what I watch, um, and a lot of the sort of like thought experiments that I play out in my head are playing with things that are happening in the real world, things that have happened in history that are often very dark.
Yeah.
I'm really, really big into history. And so Mushroom Blues incorporates a lot of colonialist themes and things like that, where
Mm.
the fungal people and their island nation are invaded and occupied by humans from across the planet. And that was kind of like the perfect territory to explore the morality of different characters. And
Mm.
no one is perfectly in sync in this story or in this world, which I think is more interesting. And there are some people who are taking advantage of certain situations, whether it's the colonist or whether it's, there's like mushroom headed gangsters and stuff like that. That was a perfect playground in order to explore human nature. And a lot of this drew
Mm.
upon, like World War II, the American occupation of Japan after World War II, and the things that happened. It's like, what happens to a society that is essentially like leveled by
Mm.
war, even though they were the aggressors in a lot of these circumstances? What
Right.
happens to a society that is leveled by atomic weapons and
Mm.
fire bombings and all this different kind of stuff? Who are the people that suffer in that kind of situation? Who are the people that take advantage? Who are the people that lord over the rest of them? Who are those that see a dark situation but actually come together in a community and move towards something positive despite the surrounding circumstances being so dreadful? You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. That's a huge undertaking, as in there's so many complex themes there
Yeah.
to explore. So, with that being the case, this is book 1,
Yeah.
right? Do you have an idea of how many books you're gonna have in the series? And
Yeah.
will
So
you
I saw
continue
I,
to
s-
explore that?
I saw Andrew in the chat.
Yes.
So the Hoffman Report. So Mushroom Blues is book 1 in the Hoffman Report. I have 3 books, 3 sequels, mapped out.
Okay.
None of them written, but I have like an outline for book 2 and a sort of vague outline for the entire series. And then my next book will actually be the start of a different trilogy, but set in the fungal verse as well.
Okay.
So that one will be 30 years after the events of the Hoffman Report, and kind of exploring things like corporations and technology. And it's leaning much more heavily into cyberpunk in that
Fan.
sense. And so the fungal verse is kind of like this playground where I get to explore different themes and different characters and different parts of human nature in different playgrounds, but have them be interconnected, where you'll see characters from the Hoffman Report show up in the next trilogy or different series. There will be little Easter eggs for, things that happened in the past. And, I plan on writing a book about the Spore War, which is referenced a lot in Mushroom Blues. There's also kind of like a more fantasy kind of vibe that I'm going towards with duology that's kind of like Fungal Samurai, which is going to take place like hundreds of years in the past, but
That
all
would
of
be
them are
so
sort of
cool.
interconnected in this world.
That sounds fantastic. And you do a lot of illustration as well, so I can only
Yeah.
imagine the artwork that you're gonna come out with for all of that too.
Yeah. So it's like some of these are actually illustrations for the next book that I'm
Oh,
going to put out. So for anyone who's read Mushroom Blues, is Koji, and if you've read it, you know who that is. And that's him, just like a little more gruff, 30 years older. Life's beating him up quite heavily.
oh
So,
dear.
yeah.
And, we have Nick here as well. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Good luck with the, multitasking
I
online
don't I
streams
don't know
there.
how you're pulling off 2 streams at once. That's madness.
It's skill. Fantastic. And Rob, hello. Thank you so much for joining
Hi,
us.
Rob. How you doing, buddy?
So in terms of Mushroom Blues, can you read that as a standalone? Is it best read? Like if someone wants to read it, jump in, dip their toes in, they like that one. Can they stop there or keep reading?
They can stop there if they want to,
Okay.
but each book in the Hoffman Report is like a sort of its standalone mystery, but there's
Ooh,
overarching plot threads that connect all 4 books. So you
right.
can read all 4 of them and get more out of it, or you can read Mushroom Blues. It might be a little bit more difficult to jump into books 2, 3, and 4 without having the context of book 1, but you could still pull it off because it's a standalone mystery, but it is setting up a lot of stuff for the books that come after.
Brilliant. So good for two different kinds of readers. Some that
Yeah.
might want to just dip their toes in, and others who are in it for the long haul.
Yeah, and with the fungal verse, like I'll have like a quartet, I'll have a trilogy, I'll have a duology, I'll have standalones. Like I have like ideas for short story collections and stuff
Wow.
like that. So there's like a lot for all different kinds of readers, basically.
So lots to look forward to.
Yeah. Lots of mushrooms. If you don't like mushrooms, I'm sorry, because that's gonna be me for like the next 5 years.
No, it's fine. They just need to convert.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. I'm gonna infect you at some point. So
There you go. With
yeah.
that being the case, I think we need to address that elephant in the room. Where did this passion for mushrooms begin, and then how did it turn into an entire universe?
It's basically been a lifelong thing. Yeah. It has been a fungal train for my entire life, Aaron. That is what it has been. Um, yeah, I mean, like I grew up or I was born in your neck of the woods, in
Yeah.
Ontario, but I moved to British Columbia. My family moved to British Columbia at an early age, and so for me, I grew up around like the temperate rainforests of
Mm.
British Columbia, which for anyone who's been to British Columbia, it's beautiful. Very much like Washington State, Oregon, or as far up as Alaska. It's kind of this huge swath of mountains and ocean and forests. There's just so much rain, so much rain. It is ridiculous. But guess what loves rain? Mushrooms. And so my friends and I, my brothers and I, we would always go out into the forest and just play. And we just mess around and like role play and stuff like that and throw pine cones at each other. But at the same time, we were also digging around. Like I just dug a lot. I would like turn over logs and see what's underneath it, see spiders and pill bugs and
Mm.
snakes and all kinds of stuff. And obviously, like, fungi are just a huge part of that. And so I'd
Yeah.
always see them just be like, this is such a weird thing. Like, it just looks so strange. And it's
Yeah.
like you have this forest and there's kind of a color palette that forests and the creatures that live in them adapt to.
Mhm.
And fungi very often counter that palette. So it'll be like, oh, here's a forest with its browns and greens and stuff like that. And then here's this like bright orange thing that looks like some weird alien like glob of spit, you
Which is
know?
yeah. It's a warning, don't touch it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so brilliant. It's just amazing how these organisms have developed in the way that they've developed in sync with their ecosystems, with the forests that are around them, with the animals that are around them, with the ways in which rain and wind function in order to spread spores and
Mm.
animals, and just being able to be like, oh, you have fur, well, you're going to carry my spores around, thank you
Yeah.
so much. And as I grew older, it's like my fascination just kind of compounded. It was like an exponential curve over the course of my life, where I just love them so much that I started researching them more. I have like stacks of books about mushrooms. I got into foraging, and I love cooking, and so cooking with mushrooms is really a big thing for me. And then on top of that, in my sort of like in my university days, when I was like 19, 20, that's when I started experimenting with psychedelics.
Okay.
And psychedelics is kind of like the other big part of the picture for me when it comes to mushrooms, the ways in which mushrooms are able to give humans the opportunity to sort of like disconnect from their conception of reality
Mm.
and explore deeper levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so for me, all of that is just incredibly fruitful ground in order to tell a story that explores not only a world, but people and the minds that inhabit those bodies.
So, I'm really curious then. Have you watched Vsauce?
What is Vsauce?
Vsauce is a YouTube channel, and it's very science-based.
Okay.
Michael is the host, and he's been doing it for years, but he does a lot of like, he puts himself as a test subject in a lot of circumstances.
Ooh.
And one that you might like, which kinda covers that topic, is he actually, he travels out to, I think it's Peru, and he,
Does ayahuasca?
ayahuasca, he does
Right on.
ayahuasca.
I
And
will tell you
and
about ayahuasca though. Ayahuasca is not fungi in any shape or
no,
form, but
but the
it is it
concept of
is it
how
is
it
like it is like such an incredibly potent psychedelic. Yeah.
yeah, it he actually brought a I think it was a neuroscientist with him, and they did scans and
Oh,
everything of his brain
very cool.
pre and post,
Yeah.
and it was, he was talking about his experiences, but also they were looking at the data, so talking about that, impact on the human mind.
Like they were able
Um
to track like his experience versus what was being shown on the neural scans
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
while it was happening.
It
Because
was before and after.
okay, they
Yeah.
weren't able to record anything like during the process.
I'm not sure, I don't think they did.
That would be really interesting.
It would have.
Um,
It was out in the middle of nowhere,
yeah, because like
so
I
his
know like
equipment was minimal.
most people who do ayahuasca in Peru, it's like they'll start in a
Yeah.
town called Iñaquitos, which is like
Okay.
in northeastern Peru, which is like the entire northeastern part of Peru is Amazonian jungle.
Yeah.
So basically, Iñaquitos is like the last bastion of humanity before you go deeper into the jungle.
Yeah, they had to
And
take
go
a
towards like you go on boats up the river and you
yeah,
go towards like these isolated tribes and stuff like that, and go see the
yeah,
shaman and everything like that. And they have similar stuff in Ecuador as well.
right.
And I've been to the Amazon twice and like talked to some of the tribal people about
Yeah,
how they incorporate this stuff into their daily or into their lives in general and their sort of ritual and
yeah,
beliefs and stuff like that. But it's incredible. Like I was talking about openness in terms of readers, but I think
yeah.
this is sort of a representation of the ways in which the human brain is never static. There's
Mm,
always the ability to mold it in different ways. And it's sort of like playing into this idea of neuroplasticity and the ways in which certain things in your life, it's like the older you get, the more static your brain becomes, even though it's never purely static. You
right.
learn a language or you read or you do certain things that actually change the shape and neural pathways of your brain, and seeing how psychedelics can do that based on the parts of the brain that they tap into, but the ways in which they interact with neurons is incredibly powerful. So it was really fun for me to sort of incorporate those experiences into mushroom blues.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. There's so much to explore in that, and that's part of why I love reading fantasy and sci-fi. Is there's so much to explore in all the different perspectives from every author,
Mhm.
and you can make it so unique. So I absolutely love that. And we have a burning question here. Do you have a favorite mushroom from Caden? Welcome, Caden.
Hi, Kate, and Dr. Love is in the building. How are you, my friend? Um, can I give two answers to this?
Absolutely.
Favorite mushroom to cook,
Oh, that's
morels.
support. Okay, morels.
Uh, morels are amazing. They look super weird. They look like weird,
Yeah.
like elongated brain kind of things,
Mhm.
but they are the easiest thing to cook in sort of like a simple way. So like you just cook them with butter and garlic and salt, and it is absolutely delicious.
Good to know.
Um, and if you can find a spot in the wild where morels grow, it is a guarantee that they will return year after year to that spot. Which is why like morel hunters are super secretive about like that's my spot and I'm never going to tell anybody about it, because they know they can go
Yeah,
there every season and there's just going to be like a huge bloom of morels that they can gather, like
right.
50 to like 200 kind of thing, which
That's
is
a
really cool.
lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot, and you can sell them too. Like they sell for like a decent amount as well. Um, favorite mushroom in general. Oh, this is a hard one because there are just so many weird ones that I really love how alien they are. Like there's one called it's like bleeding tooth mushroom, and a friend of mine in Sweden, actually the friend who was one of the people who made the album, like the Mushroom Blue soundtrack.
Yes.
He's been a friend of mine for ages, and he's really into mushrooms, and he's Swedish, and so he goes out foraging in the forest, and he sent me a picture of this, and it's basically this like really weird kind of like white bulbousy shape. It comes in many different shapes, but it like oozes this. It looks like jello. It looks like red jello that it like oozes out of it. And it looks so alien. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how can people not understand how alien our own planet is when you
Mhm.
see something like that? And there are just so many
Definitely.
mushrooms that fall into that category of like, this is like beyond conception of anything that looks remotely Earth like.
Yeah. Well, even if you look into deep ocean life
Mhm.
as well, same concept. It's
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
alien. Yeah.
Yeah, like
And
deep ocean fish and stuff that are hanging
yeah.
around like hydrothermic vents. It's like, this thing should not exist, but it does.
So exactly, exactly. It's freaky and inspiring at the same
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right? We're actually gonna shift gears here because you mentioned this and Caden is pushing it. If you have not listened to the Mushroom Blues album, do it now. Where
Caden is
I
a big fan of the album, but he's also a big fan of my playlist. He's like, "What genres are these?" And I'm just like, "Bro, let me open your mind to ambient and all these like things that I absolutely adore."
so you've got two separate playlists here. So you have a playlist from when you wrote the book versus the album that is curated to your book and readers can listen to as well.
Yeah. So the album is like an official soundtrack, and it's music that was created by Sporer to basically like soundtrack your experience if you want to. And they did an amazing job of
Yeah,
kind of conceptualizing like the sonic atmosphere of this world. But both of my friends, it's like they're both huge into mushrooms as well, so it's kind of
right.
perfect that we were able to vibe in this kind of way. And
Yeah,
at the same time, like they started a record label based on this album and this experience of working together. So
that's amazing.
they call it Fruiting Bodies, which is very apt. And our goal is basically they're going to do stuff on their own, but our goal is to release albums for every future Fungleverse book
That's
as well.
amazing.
So
So for that process, what was that like for you? And you're trying to get your book out. This is your debut. You've got you had an incredible book tour plan with so many events going on. How did you navigate all of this in the background to make sure that one, everything went off without a hitch, and then two, you're writing a book, getting a album put out. What was that like for you?
chaos. Yeah, it was like organized chaos is the best
Okay.
way that I can put it.
Yeah.
I'm just the kind of person where it's like I thrive when I put deadlines for myself. Like I have to, in order to get something done, I have to know that there's like an end point. And for me, it was like, the album was just something that I could collaborate with my friends on because I love music. Like I used to be a music journalist, so it was really easy for me to communicate with them
Oh, that's
about that kind of
fantastic.
stuff. And I also just like trust them implicitly to make incredible music. It's like they did like 3 jam sessions, and then from those 3 jam sessions, we picked 8 songs that they then expanded into full tracks and mastered. So the album was pretty
Wow.
straightforward. We were just like in tune on that whole thing. Same thing with my cover artwork, like with Felix Ortiz, like with my background in graphic design, like I know how to put together like an art brief kind of thing.
Mm.
So I was able to give him like a very clear idea of like, this is the color palette that I want. These are sort of conceptual visual elements that I want in the cover. Here's like illustrations that I've done of the architecture and mushroom people and all this different kind of stuff. Here's like a whole page full of different mushrooms that you can kind of use as inspiration. And he even went out into his backyard and like took pictures of mushrooms and incorporated that into the cover artwork,
Wow.
which is really cool. So my process with Felix was beautiful. It was so smooth. Um, the writing was probably the most difficult because it was like the thing that I had to challenge myself the most on in terms of the the sort of like themes and stuff that I was dealing with in the book, but also the process of like this is my first time revising a book.
Yeah.
Like I'd finished books before this, but then never continued them after the first draft. So this is my first time like revising and editing. And then all the while I'm trying to like take lessons from my podcast from
Yes.
SFF Addicts and be like, what are these authors saying that I can apply to this very specific thing that I'm doing right now? And so
Yeah.
we did like a masterclass with Sue Burke on revision, and I was like, cool, I'm in that right now. Let's go. And so that was really great that I was able to do that. And you know, everything around it, it was kind of like I just know how to manage myself in chaotic situations. And so, with my experiences doing like TBR con, it
Right.
wasn't it wasn't uh it wasn't a very like pressured situation for me to do like the book tour, for instance. The book tour
Yeah.
was so smooth and I barely noticed that it was happening kind of thing.
That's kind of what you
Because
want though,
yeah,
right?
exactly. From my perspective, like that's what I want. But from everyone else's perspective, it was like, oh, like holy holy shit, there's so much happening at once. But it was like I started doing that stuff in January
Right.
and started recording stuff in February. And then like towards the end of February and through March was when everything was happening. And so it's kind of like the illusion of going to a concert and all you see is the concert, but you have no idea everything that went into the sound design and the stage design and the setup and the equipment and the instruments and all that. And so for
Yeah.
me, it's like, cool, here's the book tour. It looks super stacked, but I was recording like max 2 things a week. So it was
Right.
pretty smooth for me.
That's amazing to hear because it always seems so daunting on the other end, right?
Yeah.
Even as a reader myself looking at that tour, I felt stressed for you, you know? I hate to say it that way, but there was so
Oh my
much
God.
that you had planned and so many things you were releasing on specific dates and talks, and it just seemed like there was so much, and it was thoroughly impressive on how well it was organized. So, definitely the work and up to that point shows that you did it all in the background, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
But,
like right now I'm going through the process of helping my friend Ronnie Verdi, who's releasing
yeah.
his second book in the Tales of Tremaine in August. Um, so he saw my book tour and was like, "Hey, can you help me out?" And I'm like, "Yes, because I want you to succeed." So we're basically putting together a book tour with interviews, podcasts. Like you and I have already been talking about it
Yes.
off the air about it, and so it's like I I got DMs from friends and from other authors who are just like, it was really funny and charming for me to read that stuff, because they know it's coming from the best possible place,
Yeah.
or like they'll just be like, you're making us look bad, and stuff like that. But for me, it's kind of like, I would prefer to set a higher standard for what indie authors are capable of,
Yeah.
in order for other people to see that as an example of how you can do a cover reveal, how you can
Mm.
do a book tour, all this different stuff, how you can do a launch, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, it's like giving everyone that example, and then hearing their
Mm.
feedback, and like having people reach out and be like, hey, can you help me with the book tour? Or,
Yeah.
like seeing the interior design or like the cover design of
Yeah.
Mushroom Blues. Like I've had people who are like, I want to hire you to do the interior design of my book,
That's
or I
amazing.
want your help with like my cover, etc. For me, that's like, cool. Let's just like make indie as indistinguishable as possible from trad, so that trad looks fucking embarrassed and they have to step their game up. That
Yeah.
for me is like, trad has been too lazy for
Yeah.
too long, and
I
indie
get that.
indie is just elevating to a level that I'm super proud to see. and
Yeah.
and I think, like with people like Ryan Cahill and people who are like more established, like Rob Hayes and Mike
Yes.
Fletcher, I want to see everyone just be like, okay, we can continue to do better, and we can continue to just kind of like push the boundaries. And
Right.
then hopefully at some point it's like, traditional publishers are like, what are we doing that compares
Yeah.
to this? Like I'm doing a tour for Ronnie, and I hope Tor looks at that and says, why aren't we doing tours like this for
Yeah.
more of our authors? Because to me, it's embarrassing the way that they
Yeah.
can treat their authors, the way that they can sort of handle their marketing is
Yeah.
often very lazy, and often for many authors who are in the mid list, non-existent
Yeah.
or very, very little.
No,
They
it
deserve more. And so the
yeah.
publishers need to step their game up.
So I'm curious then for you, because I agree. I like, even as a consumer, when I go to Indigo, right? We have
Mhm.
Indigo here. And the amount of times we were talking about the hardcover, there's a little drive for me to buy a hardcover when I'm getting, if the dust jacket falls off, it's losing that beautiful artwork,
Right.
right? If I lose that, that's gone. But there's also I've noticed recently, maybe in the last year, because COVID lockdowns, we weren't shopping very much in person,
Mhm.
but for the amount of years that Indie and these companies like Broken Binding have been doing sprayed edging, even on books, Indigo has only just started to trickle through with books like that, with sprayed edging, as just like a generic book that comes through. We don't have those.
Mhm.
What do you call these guys right here?
Like digital edges or anything like that.
Digital edges, leather
Yeah.
bounds.
Yep.
We've never had any of these kind of editions of books come through in big box stores,
Yeah.
for example, for
It
books, and
exists. I
it's
know, like in
sad.
the UK, with like Waterstones and Goldsboro and
Yeah.
places like that, they've actually been much better
Yes.
at sort of establishing the trend. And now North American retailers are starting to pick it up and be like, oh, people want these, and we can charge way more
Yeah.
than normal prices for it. And I think companies like Broken Binding really set the standard for what can be done,
Yeah.
and the costs at which it's done, but also like the return on investment is so much more. And for the
Mm.
fans, they get something that is way more beautiful
Yes.
than anything that they could get anywhere else. All they have to do is order it online. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
And so
exactly.
it's a no-brainer, but this is kind of like the big lumbering motions of a dinosaur industry, whereas indie is kind of like the velociraptor that's just like zipping around beneath the T-Rex's feet. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they have the indie authors have the flexibility to really push the boundaries a lot more.
Mhm.
And like with my hardcover, it's like, I'm just a designer, and so for me,
Yeah.
it's like, if someone's going to pay for a hardcover, I want to give you something beautiful, that
Yeah.
you can just like, if you're like a reader or a book talker or like a bookstagrammer or whatever, doesn't matter. If you're
Mm.
just a collector and you want that stuff, you can have it on your shelf and be like, that is damn gorgeous. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And
Thank
and you
you.
don't have to pay like exorbitant prices for it. And that's another thing. Like Broken Binding has very reasonable prices for their
Mhm.
special editions, whereas box retailers tend to put really heavy price tags on their stuff. But obviously, you're
Yeah.
talking about quantity, sir. It's quantity with quality. It's the
Yes,
two
there
of
you
them
go.
merging together. Yeah. So
And so I'm really curious with all these authors that have reached out to you about asking for help and doing these things. Have you considered doing your own? Because you have the podcast. Have you considered doing a masterclass yourself on just basic ideas and tips to help people get started if they're an indie author and they're trying to up their game a bit?
not necessarily, because we have done master classes in the past. Like we did one with
Okay,
Andy Peliquin at TBRCon, which was basically like self-pub essentials is what we
right.
covered in that. And we just go through like different topics. So I feel like in terms of the accumulated uh, back catalog, there
Okay,
is enough there for people to kind of parse through. Like even on the Fanfiatic channel, there's like an author roundtable on indie marketing, like specifically just
perfect.
marketing. So there
Yeah.
are those resources out there. I don't feel necessarily the need to like take up an entire episode talking about that stuff myself,
No,
because
fair.
I do feel like the interviews that I've done, people can get a lot of that kind of stuff out there, or they can just DM me like straight up. If you just want to shoot me a message, I'm totally cool with it. If
That's
you have any
awesome.
questions about that kind of stuff, and I already did like a two-parter with MJ on SFF Addicts where I talked
Right.
about genre bending. So I was like, I want to talk about that because that was like genre bending is something that I really enjoyed doing with
Yeah,
Mushroom Blues, and I'm really excited to do in future books. Basically, everything I'm gonna write is like genre bending in some capacity.
I
Um,
love it.
so yeah, like I totally get where you're coming from with that question, but I do think there are the resources in terms of the back catalog. Just DM me and be like, are there specific episodes that you're referring to? I'll let you know there, or you can just go back and listen at your will.
No, that's brilliant. I appreciate you mentioning that because for myself, even, just doing the booktube stuff and chatting with authors, I've actually had questions about certain publishing stuff. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. I cannot answer those questions, but I can pass you along to people. So if I can get more resources for people, all the better.
Yeah, and there are tons of great podcasts out there. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, just in the chat here, like, Herman, with Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse, like he's doing an amazing job and representing a lot of really great indie authors. There's just, like Publishing Rodeo, my friends Sunyi and Scott are talking really, really honestly about traditional publishing and the kind of experiences that different authors have had there. So I think honestly now there is no excuse for you to say like, I don't know
Mm.
anything about self-publishing or trad publishing. It's like the transparency is, you're welcome, Herman. The transparency is becoming more and more opaque. And I think it's from the author side of things,
Mm.
whereas the publishers would never reveal this kind of stuff, or the indie authors just never talked about it,
Yeah.
or there just weren't the channels and resources to talk about these kinds of things, whether it's like YouTube channels or podcasts, etc. Now
Mm.
there are, and now nobody has any excuse to be like, oh, the information's not out there. It's like, yes, it
Right.
is. It is
Yeah.
there, and it just takes a little bit of effort for you to understand, here are the platforms that can give me the information that I need.
It's a booming
Yeah.
topic in community. It's just from talking to authors in past, the difference from a few years back to now in the self
Yep.
pub industry is incredible. So, well, let's dive in back to your book, shall
Okay.
we?
Yeah.
Because I have way more questions than we probably have time for. But first and foremost, we do have a question I want to go back to from Zamar, I think it was, which is, what is your inspiration for Mushroom Blues?
Okay. So this one's very, very multifaceted because it's taken a long time. I think Zamar already left too, which is unfortunate. He said,
Yeah.
"May the spores be with you," which I I love that. Holy shit, that
Oh,
is
yes,
brilliant.
there it is.
What's the date today? Like May 8th. We're 4 days late, but it's okay. We're gonna co-opt. May the 4th be with you.
Yeah.
Um, this is I mentioned earlier about like my fascination with mushrooms. That was like the big component and the trajectory on that end. But when it comes to my reading, like I hit like a huge lull in high school and kind of into university.
Mm.
And then there was one particular university course in my final year that just kind of opened my eyes again to the magic of science fiction and fantasy. And that was a very specific niche course called Post-Apocalyptic Landscapes, which was
Wow.
taught by like a super quirky woman whose course was brilliant, but she was a shit teacher because she just went off on massive tirades about Star Trek,
Oh,
specifically
no.
Star Trek. And no hate against Star Trek. I'm like,
No.
I just did not pay for this. I did not pay for you to talk about Star Trek in this
Yeah.
particular instance. But the course curriculum was brilliant. The way that it was planned out and this sort of stuff that we were covering, we were going from films like The Matrix to Apocalypse Now, and we were reading books like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. There's an Angela Carter one that we read as well, which was super fascinating, which is kind of like a deconstruction of fairy tales, but like in a
Oh.
post-apocalypse, and it was super cool. And I forget the name, but that course just like opened my eyes again to how brilliant science fiction and fantasy are and the sort of breadth in what they can discuss through the lens of these sort of like fictional worlds and narratives. And so after that, I moved to Berlin, and then my love for reading just really picked back up again.
Mm.
And there was a bookstore in Berlin called Otherland, which was like it was a mainly German language bookstore, but their English section was huge. It took
Mm.
up probably like a quarter of the store, which for anyone
Oh,
who's lived in another country, 25% of a bookstore being taken up by an English section is massive.
yeah.
And so I just geeked out with the owners of that bookstore, and it was kind of like my safe haven in
Mm.
Germany where I didn't speak the language yet and all these things. And that's where I found China Mieville. I found Jeff Vandermeer, and Jeff Vandermeer is like hands down my biggest inspiration
Mm.
from like a reader perspective.
Yeah.
Annihilation in particular, that book, after reading it, it's just like it made me so emotional, and it stuck with me for such a long time. Like it's with me to this day. That book made me decide I want to be a professional writer,
Mm.
and so it's like digging deeper into his catalog, reading other authors, reading weird fiction, digging back into genres that I kind of ignored for a long time, like mystery and noir and stuff like
Yeah.
that, crime thrillers, all these things where it's like these different genres that I really loved at different parts of my life kind of coalescing in my fiction. And Mushroom Blues wasn't the first book that I wrote in the fungal verse. So I actually created the fungal verse, and I created this world, and I spent years like researching and drawing. Like so much of my world building process was just illustration.
That's fantastic, though, to be able
And
to put it into a visual format as you're building it.
yeah, I'm just such a visual person. Like I need
Yeah.
to be able to conceptualize something that way.
Mm.
And I'm really good at being able to just do it in my head in terms of like the skill that I developed being a tattoo artist of like, here's this piece of your body and you have a particular idea of something. How
Mhm.
can I take that particular shape of your form and fit your idea into it? And so much of fiction is like, how can I take this genre and this genre, or how can I take these tropes and these conventions and fit them
Mm.
into the mold of sort of the restriction that the medium has? How
Mm.
can I fit these things into text form, and how can I use those words to then best evoke the ideas and the imaginations of the people who are going to read them? And so I spent so much time reading about mushrooms and drawing and researching all these different kinds of things and researching a lot about Japan as well, which is another big fascination of mine.
Yeah.
And basically just like getting to a point where I realized I haven't written anything. At least like I haven't written anything of value in a
Right.
sense. And so I just kind of ditched so much, but kept the world. And
Mm.
then took that and started writing Spore City, which is going to be my next book and the start of a different trilogy. Finished that first draft, but like hated it. Not in the sense of like I hated the story, I hated the process. Because it was like
Oh,
that was like my growing pains book where I had to realize like
right.
these are the things that I need to do in order to be a writer. And like I fumbled through so many different attempts at different processes while writing that
Yeah.
book. And so my break from that book was actually a novella, like a reader magnet that I had planned that was a prequel mystery, sort of like police procedural. And
Oh,
I took that
cool.
and I was like, huh, this has like 14 chapters in this outline that I created. And I created that outline before I finished Spore City. And then I realized like, no, I can expand this like 3 times bigger because I just
Right.
don't know how to outline clearly at that point. And so I expanded it into what became Mushroom Blues and sort of like changed the main character from a man to a woman and brought Koji into it,
Mm.
and just kept building it from there essentially and pulling in genres that I really love, like sort of aesthetics from cyberpunk and cyberpunk themes,
Mm.
plus police procedurals and like very sort of conventional framework that can ground people while I'm introducing them to like fungi and body horror and all these different
Yes.
things that are being thrown into there.
It's a lot that you've thrown in, but, I know that for a lot of readers, we're looking for themes, stories, characters we love, but a refreshing take on it. And it's quite the leap when you take that, you craft this entire world. I think in previous podcasts, you talked about 6 or 7 years worth of research, and, like,
Yeah.
this
So
entire process took a lot of time.
that like that process that I talked about in terms of world building
Mm,
and illustration, that was probably about 3 years, more or less.
okay.
And then like 2 to 3 years, and then Spore City was like 2 years, and Mushroom Blues I wrote, revised, and released that in like a little over a year.
Wow. That's
So
incredible.
so I learned like so many mistakes. And even with Mushroom Blues, I made so many mistakes, but it's like
Yeah.
that's what I love, is being able to mess up and figure out the most potent lesson from that failure or from
Yeah.
that mistake, and being
Well,
able to sort of like apply that to the future in order to not let that happen again, but also just
yeah.
like grow as a person, as a professional, as a writer.
Absolutely, and there's only so much that you can, improve upon with your writing until you actually release something and get feedback
Yeah.
from a larger audience.
Yeah.
So, being stuck in your own head and having your own perspective is only gonna get you so far.
Right. And that's where like it was huge for me, like halfway through the writing of Spore City, to basically start like a writing critique group. It
Okay.
started off with Peter Hartog. People in the indie community might know him.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, him, he was like the first person to sort of be there with me, but also Dan Stout, author of Titan Shade. He helped us set up that critique group. So he was like,
Mm.
I'm part of other critique groups. I don't want to become a part of the new one, but like, I'll join you guys for your first one to sort of walk you through ways that you can approach critiquing each other's work. So that was hugely helpful. And I'm so glad like now to have like Dan's blurb on the back of at least the hardcover,
Yeah.
which is really, really awesome. And he's so happy. Like I sent him a hardcover copy and he was just like really, really, really thankful for that. So I got Dan here
Yes,
on
okay.
my blurb. So that one was really meaningful for me because I'm like, that was a pivotal stage for me to step up my game and basically realize
Right.
like I'm not just in my own isolated bubble. Like I can do stuff with other people that helps me improve my craft.
Yeah.
Like exponentially as well.
I love that the people around you and the people in the community that you've made have been so supportive. That's such a huge thing is you like you said, you don't wanna be well, you are isolated at first, but you don't want to be, right? You want that support in the long term. You want people you
Yeah.
can connect with and work with creatively in a professional manner. That's how anyone improves.
And that extends to podcasting, that extends to like podcasting is one of the and becoming part of Fanfi Addict, the book blog. Those were two really, really key moments where it's like Fanfi Addict introduced me to sort of like the reading and blogging community, and then podcasting introduced me to the podcasting and booktube community, but
Mm,
also developing relationships with authors. And the authors are just so amazing and so willing to share their knowledge and their experiences. And the readers are so passionate, and the bloggers are so passionate, the booktubers are passionate, the podcasters, everyone.
yeah.
If you're willing to sort of like put your foot out there and give back to the community in some sense, you will receive, it's not going to be like
Mm,
completely 50-50 equal, but you will receive something in return. And
absolutely.
it's not like you can just come into this world and expect to release a book and for everyone to just love you and love your book and buy
Mm,
hundreds, thousands of copies and not receive that because you didn't engage with the community. You didn't put in the time to make those connections, but also to foster those connections beyond just a surface level thing. Like I always like one of the biggest lessons I learned from the podcast was from Chuck Wendig, where he told MJ and I like never treat anyone else in this industry as the rung on a ladder
yeah.
that you can just step on top of and move past.
Yeah.
It's like everyone is part of this like interconnected web, and I always kind of equated in my mind to mycelium. It's like we're all symbiotically connected.
Yeah.
One day you might give more than you receive, but at some point you're going to receive so much in return. Like
Yeah.
break-ins and everything that they've given me is just unbelievable. All the people that helped me with my book tour, with my cover launch, everything. You doing interviews like this,
Yeah.
so much of it is just like all I can think is gratitude at those moments. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
it's like don't take that for granted and don't shirk that really fundamental part of all of this, because if you're isolated enough writing, so why the
Mm.
hell would you isolate yourself more beyond that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, be a kind human being. Do what you
Yeah.
can where you can. Support your fellows in the community, and it's so true. Even when I started my BookTube channel, I a huge credit goes out to people like Patrick and Mike and so many other bigger people who have these huge channels and just took the time to shout about
Mhm.
mine. It was like one tweet or one thing. Hey, go check out this channel, but from Petrix, I think I got something like 600 subscribers in a matter of a
Wow.
day, and I was just
Yeah.
blown away. You know? It
Yeah,
was
and
amazing.
it's so great, and it's never like you're seeking a particular thing. It's
No.
like what you receive in return, like the gifts that you receive in return are going to be unexpected, and they're going to hit you in ways that you can't even really imagine. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's the coolest thing. You know what I mean? Like for me, it was beautiful. Like last year, I went to Canada, and when I was in Toronto with my son, I met up in person with Crystal Matar and MJ
Yes.
Akun, and it was just like, whoa! it was it was surreal, and to think like we developed our relationships online, but the connection is so strong that we can meet up in person and sort of like feel each other for the first time, and all of it feels comfortable and genuine.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That to me is just unbelievable that an online relationship can develop into something like that. Like MJ and I talk
Yeah.
every day, and people would be
Yeah.
surprised that like you know, she started in like January of last year, but we only met each other in October of like the year before. So it's like we knew each other for like 3 months. And then I was like, hey, you want to be my co-host? And now we're like best friends.
That's
So you can never really know where this will take you. But
yeah.
the only person that's putting up barriers is yourself. So it's like,
Mm.
try not to stifle yourself as much as possible. It's pretty much it.
So true, and I can relate to that as well because I've had the opportunity to meet Crystal and, Tim here as well in
Nice.
person. They're both in my neck of the woods, so I've had the pleasure of being able to sit with them and chat over coffee, and that same
Yeah.
thing where we met online, we chatted for a bit, and, ended up saying, "Hey, wait, you live near me.
Yeah.
Wanna meet up and get coffee?" Same with Cal Black, I've had the pleasure of chatting with her too, and yeah, it's amazing the friendships that blossom from putting yourself out there and doing these things.
Yeah.
So in terms of your process with writing and getting all this down and articulating it, it's been quite the journey for you. And the amount of years and it sounds like you got a couple in the vault that we might never see, but I'd love to know for your characters what your process was like for building them and their arcs, getting their personality to jump off the page the way they do.
That is okay. So MJ and I are kind of like, I love being her friend because I get to figure out things about her process where I'm like, that just isn't for me. In
Right.
the sense of like, she just released this like writing resource guide, this sort of like
Okay.
interactive journal thing, where
Yeah.
she basically like incorporates all of these different worksheets and things that she does in order to flesh out world building details and character sheets and all that kind of stuff. And in a lot of ways, it's like she treats writing sort of like a D&D campaign, which is
Okay.
awesome, and it really works for her. But when it comes to my process, it's like I didn't know who Koji was until I drew him. You know what I mean?
Right.
So much of it is like, what do they look like? I don't write it down. I just have it in my head.
Yeah.
Like a lot of that visual information is just in my head. And for me to understand like what this character's personality is like, what their motivations are, I kind of have to just write them and
Mm.
see where it takes me. And that ended up being I was saying I do not want to adopt her Excel plotting. She knows that, and I've been very clear. um, so for me, it's really fun to be able to go into the character's mind through the context of the story and the world as they're experiencing it, and being able to
Mm.
use those tidbits to be like, okay, well, you know, like first draft is just a mess, like a dumpster fire, but I kind of appreciate it for the fact that it provides so many choice things that you can like pull out and expand upon. And so, you know, like for Henrietta, she she has this aversion to fungi. You know, she's mycophobic.
Yeah.
That didn't come about until the second draft. She There's like a whole storyline with her traumatic past and her alcoholism and how she's kind of like moving past that. That didn't come in until second or third draft. So many of
Okay.
these things, like full characters. You know, Koji's probably like the most fully formed character in my head before I started writing, just
Right.
because I'd written him in Spore City because he's a POV
Okay.
character in that. So I knew him. I was like, I know where you come from, just like I know you. And Henrietta was like a lot of exploration and figuring out
Mm.
how I wanted to build her character. And there are like characters that I absolutely adore, you know, side characters. So I'm like, I'm gonna incorporate you into the sequels because I love you so much. They
Yes.
didn't appear until like second, third, fourth draft. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
this entire character just popped out of the scene and was like birthed in this circumstance of you know, world and plot and all the characters around them. And it's like I had no idea where you came from, but you just exist in my head now. So like for anyone who's listening and has read far, not too far into the book, I think it's like probably like 30 to 40%, 35%.
Okay.
A character named Rio, who's kind of like a jazz singer.
Mm.
She did not exist until draft 3. So I was
Ah,
just like, huh, you came out of nowhere, but I really like you. And so now she's going to become a bigger part of books 2 and 3 and 4.
nice. I love
Yeah.
it. I love when side characters get a little bit more love.
Yeah.
There's quite a few where I've read, I'm like that. I don't care. The main character, yeah, they're good, but the star of the show is the side character over here.
Exactly. Exactly. And so for me, it's so fun to be able to understand. It's like a big part of the skill set is like understanding when those are things worth
Mhm.
exploring and investing a little bit more time in. And often it's like that will become a huge boost to the quality of the story or like the depth of the narrative and the character interactions and that kind of stuff.
Right. And something I'd like to delve into a little bit here because you mentioned, drawing the character was a helping step for you. How did
Can
you
I
get
can
in?
I can I show?
Yeah.
Because I think Caden asked earlier if I could show
Yeah.
Koji. I'm not going to zoom in.
Yes,
I'm
by
just
all
going to share
means.
my screen because I have like the scanned version of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'll see.
Um, let's see here. Okay, so that should is that showing?
Yeah, I can see that there.
Okay,
There we go.
yeah. There's Koji.
That's awesome. And I know there was a bit of chat there between, Bo and Caden saying, "We're meeting up in Japan, we're getting matching mushroom tattoos."
Can I tattoo them on you? Can I be the one who does them?
That would be so
Yeah,
awesome.
and then I'll just tattoo myself because I've done that like dozens of times. So
How often did you have to do that for your, like, apprenticeship if you had to go through that
I
stage?
did not do a formal apprenticeship, but I
Oh, okay.
probably tattooed myself like at least 40 times, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've got like almost 70 tattoos in total, but like 40 of them ish were me.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot. I've got 3, and that's that's like, I don't need any more.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you just look at my arm and there's just like, there's so many. So,
Yeah.
and then I have like on my chest, on my stomach, on my legs are covered. So,
Would you get more?
oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah? You're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
cover everything."
I don't need to cover everything, but it'd be like whatever happens, happens. If I find the right
Right?
tattoo artist in the right place, then hell yeah.
Awesome. So, out of all this, how did you start with your artist journey, and then how did it progress into tattooing?
That has also been like a lifelong thing where it's like my dad always wanted to be a comic book artist, but like not like comic books as in Marvel or DC or anything like that, but like more like comic, like newspaper comic strips is like what he was
Right.
obsessed with. So he always
Okay.
wanted to do that. But obviously, like, good thing he didn't because newspapers just, went
Yep, they're
went the
gone.
with it. Um, but he always instilled in me this sort of like artistic side, and so my parents give me, like little like projects that I worked on in like kindergarten or grade 1 and all that kind of stuff. One of them was like a project that we had to do that was like a film reel. So it's basically like our teacher
Yeah.
printed out like film strips, and then we drew the scenes from our favorite movie or favorite book,
That's so
and
cool.
and basically just like stitched all this film reel together. And it's probably like in total, I would say like 40 like film shots, like film reels.
Wow.
And it's like you basically like unrolls this like super long thing, but it was the Chronicles of Narnia. It was the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
No
Um,
way.
so from a very early age, it was like I was combining my art with my love of fantasy or
Mm,
anything else really. Like I never wrote fan fiction, but I drew fan comics. Like I
right.
just had binders full of stuff that was like what are like Captain Underpants. I loved Captain
Yes.
Underpants when I was a kid. So I had like Captain Underpants fan comics and stuff
That's
like that.
awesome.
Yeah. So that has just been a thing my entire life. And like going into high school, I had a really probably like the only legit mentor that I had in high school was my art teacher, who really just saw the potential that I had and like the love that I have for the craft. And my last 2 years of high school, like grade 11, grade 12, he was like, you create your own course. And you just tell me the
Wow.
supplies that you need. Basically, he's like, you create your course, but you also come up with like a materials list and all that kind of stuff, and I'll give it to you.
That's the best
Um,
kind of teacher.
yeah, it was unbelievable. For my grad project, I custom painted shoes and wore them to my graduation ceremony, and
That's
also
amazing.
sold sold painted and sold like 4 pairs to other kids. They were like, "Hey, here's a pair of shoes. Can you paint this?" And they like brought me brand new like Nikes and just asked me to like custom paint them, which was super cool. So that just like permeated my whole life, the way that
Yeah.
mushrooms has, the way that like so many of my passions have.
Mm.
And when I finished high school, or sorry, when I finished university, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then like ended up going to Berlin. And when I was in Berlin, uh, ended up working at Urban Outfitters, which is like the closest I've ever been to working like a corporate job or anything like that. But it's like Urban Outfitters is a bit of a joke in terms of like a corporation. It's kind of like a very loose coalition of weird creative people who just happen to like run a clothing store. Um, so like I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Like I was doing music
Mm.
journalism at that time, and other friends, it was like they were photographers or they were designing clothes, and this is Berlin too, so people are just kind of
Yes.
very free spirited, very creative, lots of drugs and stuff like that. And so one day after work, I just went back to my friend's house, this Polish friend of mine, and another friend came, and we were just drinking beers and smoking. And the Polish guy started pulling out tattoo equipment from his backpack and was like, "Hey, I got this stuff when I went back to Poland. Do any of you want a tattoo?" And
What?
he, he tattooed our other friend on his ankle. And then I asked him if I could just try it myself. And so I ended up tattooing myself that little like evergreen tree that's right
Oh,
there.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I just like I fell in love with it and went to work, and everyone was like, "You did that yourself?" And so I ended up tattooing friends at work. Not at
Wow.
work, friends from
Yeah,
work.
it's an important distinction.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And me and my Polish friend, we just he made a deal with me. He's like, "If you pay for materials, like we can just throw tattoo parties and like we can just both practice. Like use my machine, my equipment, everything like that, but you just pay me like €5, €10, whatever. And I would tattoo 3 people, he would tattoo 3 people. We did that like 2 or 3 times a week. He
Wow.
eventually sold his equipment to me, and I just started tattooing out of my bedroom, basically. And it's like, yeah, like I started tattooing out of my apartment and kept tattooing friends, tattooing myself, really
Yeah.
understanding the craft, all of that, like to the point where, ended up working at studios in Berlin. Like some of the best
Wow.
studios in Berlin, did like a sort of shadow apprenticeship for like 2 months at one of the top studios in Berlin. Just met incredible people, and then came to Quito and ended up opening my own tattoo studio here, which unfortunately had to close down because of the pandemic.
Right.
But yeah, my life completely changed because of that. Like I was
Yeah.
able to live and support myself in Berlin just by tattooing people, and I could quit my job and just kind of like explore my creativity and travel at the same time, like travel around Europe
Yeah.
for very cheap and tattoo in different places. Like I've had the pleasure of tattooing in like New York and Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver
Wow.
and London and Paris, like all these different places. So it's been wild to be like, oh wow, you can actually like make a career out of this, even though
Yeah.
it has its particular challenges and there's a lot of ego in
Mm.
tattooing, but there's a lot of ego in writing too. So
Yeah. I think in any profession you get into, when it has a form of creativity and passion behind it, you're gonna come across that. Um, Both Bo and Daniel here have a comment regarding getting a Adrian M. Gibson mushroom tattoo.
actually, I'm gonna be tattooing Crystal when I go to Worldcon in Glasgow,
Oh,
because
that's
yeah,
amazing.
I wanted to give her one in Toronto, but my son got sick. Um,
Yeah,
so I'll be bringing my tattoo equipment to Glasgow, which I'm really excited
that's
about. Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, It's a fascinating to see how your journey has taken so many different creative leaps
Yeah.
and how you just kind of you've gone with it.
Yeah,
So
but that's just kind of my vibe, is like pivoting from
mm,
thing to thing, like understanding the threshold for a particular thing. Like if my threshold for sort of like love for that particular creative medium is sort of waning, it's not that I don't like tattoos anymore. It's that I didn't like my frustrations with the business side of things built and
mm,
built and
right,
burnt me out on that. But I still love the act of tattooing, which is why I'm just only going to tattoo friends. It's not that I can't do it anymore.
right.
It's just that I don't want to, because I don't want to turn it again into another business practice. And so understanding that that was a necessary pivot for me to like step away from that. And, my first son was going to arrive soon. The pandemic was happening. My wife and I were
Yeah.
like, I don't know what's going on. And that's when I was like, how can I form another sort of sense of connection with people? And that's
Mm.
when I joined Twitter and ended up joining FanFi Addict and starting SFF Addicts. And now it's like almost 3 years later, and I've published my first novel. And so, yeah, it's like understanding what
Mm,
your gut is telling you. And,
mm,
if whoever's read to the end of Mushroom Blues will understand what I mean when I say little spirits. And
mm,
little spirits is a term that came from my experiences with psychedelic mushrooms and the ways in which the sort of sensory beings that were around me and with me during those experiences kind of
right.
pushed me in certain directions that ended up benefiting me a lot, and
Mm,
trusting more in my gut and the little microbes and fungi and all that
mm,
fun stuff that's down there, as opposed to my ego.
right. Yeah, it's important. I know for myself what ended up helping me shift in terms of that kind of perspective was reading about Buddhist mindsets.
Yep,
And that was something that helped me with anxiety. I have chronic pain, so it helped with the perspective of dealing with that pain on a day-to-day basis and not being able to escape it, but also that being more humble as
exactly.
well, right? And living with certain states of your being.
Yeah, and I feel like Buddhist religious practices and meditation and things along those lines, the ways in which they're able to utilize meditation to get closer towards transcendental experiences
Yeah,
is very much what a lot of people go through when they have psychedelic experiences.
right.
And so for me, it was like that was my transcendental conversion over the course of my 20s. And it taught me so much about myself. It opened my eyes to the sort of troubles and traumas that I've had in the past.
Yeah.
But it also helped me to foster an identity and like a way of
Mm,
living that was more healthy and um, beneficial for me, but also beneficial for the people around me, and beneficial for the things that I wanted to do, in
right.
terms of like, if if I put up too many walls in front of myself and saying like, oh, like nobody wants to start a podcast with me, it never would have happened.
Yeah.
But I asked everyone at FanFi Addict, and everyone was like, no, I'm okay. And I'm like, okay, then I'll start it myself,
Yeah.
you know?
Good on you.
So
Yeah.
you did the same thing. It's like you started a
Yeah.
booktube channel.
I got kicked in the butt a few times by a few
Yeah.
people, but yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's
Yeah.
like you ultimately pulled the trigger on that decision and
Yeah.
created it and continued to do it. And
Mhm.
obviously people appreciate consistency. Um, and it's like, if you're continuing to put out content and you love doing it and there are people who are appreciating it, then it's worthwhile doing that. But
Yeah.
if you are too fearful from the get-go to start that channel, to start a podcast, to join a blog, to write a book, whatever it
Mm.
is you're doing, like even for me to like decide I'm going to tattoo myself and see where that goes. I was a
Mm.
professional tattoo artist for 6.5 years, like
Yeah.
tattooing on 3 different continents and having a great time and meeting incredible people. Now there are hundreds of people around the world who have my artwork on their body permanently, and
Yeah.
I'm still friends with so many of them. And now it's the same thing with a book. It's like hundreds of people have decided to buy my book, and now I have the opportunity to build relationships with them. And
Yeah.
so It's like you're doing yourself a disservice if you let fear be the thing that prevents you from doing the thing that
Mm.
you believe, probably your gut's telling you, you will enjoy doing this despite the challenges, you will love this.
Yeah.
If you let fear, it's like I have it actually tattooed on my leg, is the quote from Dune, about fear, and fear being the mind killer. And it
Yeah.
is just one of the most powerful paragraphs in science fiction, but it
Yeah.
applies to so much of life. It's like, if you let that stifle you, you will just wither.
Yeah. It's, the same with what ifs. If you keep asking
Yep.
what if, and that applies to, the past, looking back on the past and regrets, but also what if I do this in terms of the future? You're never gonna move forward. You're never
Yep.
gonna find a direction. So I thoroughly appreciate that. And, Daniel here says, "Have you read Zig Zag Zen? It's about intersecting of Buddhism and
I have
psychedelics."
not, but that sounds fascinating, and I'm going to put it on my TBR right now.
There you go. We also
Thank
have
you, Daniel.
Charlie in the chat as
Hi,
well.
Charlie.
He says, sorry, I'm late. What did I miss?" Bo immediately says, "We're all getting mushroom tattoos. Are you in?" And we do have a few people in the chat who said
Oh
they've
my
been
god.
afraid of needles, so I apologize if that conversation was a bit triggering, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah.
It is what it is, but at the
Yeah.
very least, it's like you get 70 plus tattoos, your pain tolerance just disappears.
Yeah, well,
So,
yeah, I
meanwhile,
can
I had to get
imagine.
shot recently and passed out immediately. All right, Matt. Well,
Yeah. Sorry, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
yeah, thank you for joining us. Sorry for the tattoo talk.
I mean, I had, so I have a tattoo from my hip down to my knee, and
Ooh,
I did probably one of the stupidest things I could have done with that, which was I was told, "You can save $200 if you sit for a full 8 hours and then come back for a separate appointment and sit for however long it takes to finish it."
right. So probably you did the line work first, and then you did the color or shading or whatever in the second
Yep.
appointment, right? Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
So
That's pretty common practice, though. Yeah.
yeah. So sitting the first full 8 hours was I was like, "Oh, I can do this. I'm a champ. I can." I was immediately proven wrong when I tried to walk the day after. You don't know how much fat is in your leg until it starts jiggling on a fresh tattoo.
Yeah. And
It hurts.
a note for everyone out there are more nerves in fat than you would ever think are there. So probably one of the
Yeah.
worst places to get tattooed is actually your butt, because
Oh,
there is an incredible amount of nerve endings in
yeah.
your butt fat.
Oh, lovely.
So, yeah. Obviously
Avoid that.
ribs are just like horrendous.
Yes, I had a
Uh
friend do that.
yeah, like anywhere where there's bone, like I
Yep,
have like this tattoo here where it's like it kind
that
of
would
like
have hurt.
goes up onto my clavicle.
Yeah,
That, like, anytime it hit bone, I was just like, I want to die. But
yeah,
you get through it, like life
yeah,
sucks sometimes, but you put yourself in that position and you kind of push through it. So
yeah. Well, what do they advertise to women for so many years? Beauty is pain, pain is beauty. Applied to makeup and, like, hairstyling, but still.
yeah, that feels like the like pull them up by your bootstraps bullshit for
Yeah.
women. Like, that's your version. Beauty
Yeah,
is pain. Pain is beauty.
basically. "You have to wear those heels. It's painful, but darling, you look gorgeous."
Yeah. You're gonna ruin your spine, but it's fine. Your ass is
Oh,
gonna pop.
exactly. Who cares about your spine? It's not like it's helping you any.
Who cares about the tendons in your legs? It's like nobody cares about that stuff.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so I actually have a couple more questions for you if you have
Okay.
some more time.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go for it.
Brilliant. So I did want to ask about your experience with the podcast a bit because we were talking about that. But I know you've chatted with some big names in fantasy and authors, and I'm really curious about two things. First being, what's been a conversation or a podcast that's really struck home for you personally?
This is really difficult because there are so many.
I ask hard questions here.
I know, just hard-hitting questions, damn it. Because I take away so much from every single one.
Yeah.
It's like, whether it's, like a New York Times bestseller, like we spoke with Jim Busher last year. MJ and I are just like, what happened? It was like we talked to like Christopher Paolini and Martha Wells and Jim Butcher all in the same year. We are just like, holy shit. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that like regardless of like the success that an author has or what stage they're at in their career, they always have something really beneficial to offer. And so it's like, even if it's a debut author or an indie author, or if it's a New York Times bestseller or like award-winning author, et cetera, there's just so much that I can take away from every single thing. And like both MJ and I, while we're recording, are taking notes about all this different stuff. And it's so like Jim did a masterclass on this sort of like narrative approach called scene sequel, which is how you approach sequential storytelling and how you transition from one scene to the next, and sort of like the emotional payoff that delivers. You know, I wasn't the greatest at action scenes, so it was really helpful to talk to my friend Alexander Darwin about writing action, because he has a background in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and martial arts. You know, I always love talking to Fonda Lee. She's just like my author crush, because she's just the best. And so every time I talk to her, I'm just like really excited to hear what she has to say, but like talking with her about how to approach like morally gray characters. And she just dropped this bombshell that episode where she was like, I never approach it as morally gray characters, I approach it as morally gray worlds and how those characters inhabit them. And I was like, damn. That just like blew my mind. And so everything after that, I was like, Mushroom Blues isn't a book of morally gray characters. It's just a really morally gray world and how they inhabit it and interact with all of the different systems and people within that world. You know, and her, like, as I always appreciate talking to writers who are also parents, because I'm a father of 2 kids. I'm a stay-at-home dad. And so the ways in which different people approach writing, and, you know, if you've ever read On Writing by Stephen King, it's like, find your sort of like muse spot and your muse time, and like blah blah blah, like find the spot at the time for you to just like engage your creativity. And for me, I'm like, I can't, like, literally I wrote Mushroom Blues, parts of it, with my son asleep on my lap. You know what I mean? Like, I wrote so much of Mushroom Blues in like fragments of like 15 minutes here and like an hour there. And none of it was consistent. And, you know, talking to authors like Fonda and talking to other authors who are parents, it's like, yeah, being a parent is very inconsistent, because kids are completely unpredictable. And so you can't force your creativity to be that predictable. And you can't wait for the right moment, because the right moment will never come. And so for me, it was a relief to hear that from people who are like, have careers and have X number of books out and have won awards and all the different kind of stuff. And they're like, yeah, like I wrote part of this book, like dropping my kids off at swim class and sitting in the car on my laptop. And I'm like, bravo, that is amazing. And so that gave me so much inspiration to be like, not to use being a parent and the lack of time as an excuse not to do the thing. It's like, just make the time, make it happen. Otherwise it never will.
Even if you can only get out a few sentences, right?
Yeah, no, like I would have entire days where, like, Richard Kadri actually said something really, really profound, where he was like, even if you're not writing, you're still writing. Even if you're not working on the story, you're working on the story, because you are spending so much time thinking about it. You are consumed by it. You might have the biggest revelation in the entire book happen while you're showering or like grocery shopping. But give yourself the space to like let your story breathe and exist in your head. And those are the moments where things can still happen and develop, and figure out a system that works for you in order to like note that stuff down and make it tangible, so that you don't forget it and you can kind of incorporate it into what you've already got going.
I've heard, and I use this too, Google Drive. It's great. You know, if you are in that pinch and you need to type something out quick, it'll pop up on your computer at home, right?
Exactly.
There's lots of technology out there now that can help with all of that too. And
it's like the cloud is probably, they are very much tiny terrorists.
They are.
The cloud is like the best possible thing for writers now, where it's like you can write anywhere and then access it later.
Yeah.
whether you want to use Google Drive or you want to use like Google, like Google Docs or whatever, or like I have a notes app that synchronizes between my computer and my phone, and I use that
Yeah.
for my daily organization, but I also use that to like, I just have a section where I just like drop notes, and then I can just go into my computer and like incorporate it into the story. And
Yeah.
that system worked really well for me. So it's like there's so many ways to do it now.
And it takes a bit of exploration too, right? You have to
Yep. Yep.
try and figure out what works for you. So don't count yourself out just because the sun isn't hitting on the solstice on your laptop and through the window and things aren't working out time wise.
Like, oh shit, Mercury's in retrograde. I don't know what to do
Dang
now.
it.
It's like no writing today.
So if you could give three pieces of advice, and they can be about anything at all, rapid fire,
Okay.
what would they be?
I think a lot of them are like very more like succinct versions of what we talked about
Yeah,
already.
go for it. We can use it as a sum up.
Yeah, there we go. This sums up the entire conversation. Be open. Be open to new ideas, be open to new people, new experiences. If you allow yourself to be open, then you will be providing yourself the opportunity to find the things you love and find the things that you don't. And that for me is always a benefit, because knowing what you don't like, knowing what doesn't work for you or who you don't like or what you don't like is as beneficial as finding the things that you love
Mm,
and the people that you love. Because then you can sort of like fine tune your life in
yeah.
ways that are more productive and more positive, and just kind of like push all the shit aside, like
Yes.
make a nice clean path for you and just like push all the bullshit aside. And on that note, it's like find people that you click with, like find a community.
Mm,
It doesn't matter if that community is in person, if that community is online. If you're like, MJ always says that she's sort of like an introvert at heart,
mm.
and she approaches social situations where it's like, oh, I think I
Oh,
froze for a second.
yep. Yeah, you froze there for a second. That's all right.
Okay.
We
Is
can
my
hear
voice
you.
coming? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you can approach social situations where it's like you're draining your battery in a sense.
Mm,
Um, but you can still be social, and you can still do the thing that is necessary to sort of like get you where you want to go.
mm.
But then you can have your introverted time where you're on your own and you're more contemplative and you're more isolated, etc. So it's like find your comfort zone and find the people that fit you. Like find the people who have a similar sense of humor, a similar reading taste, whatever it may be. Just find those people, and it will make your life infinitely better.
Mm.
And last piece of advice. This one's tricky.
How do you narrow it down to just three? It's like picking your
Exactly.
favorite books.
Damn it. Okay. Um, okay. This kind of has to do with just creativity in general.
Okay.
But based on like my experiences with more like visual storytelling, um, I would say if someone wants to be a writer, don't confine yourself to just words. There are so many different ways that you can inspire yourself and sort of
Mm.
build a foundation for your ideas and your world. Like MJ and I were just talking to Veronica Roth recently, and her basically go-to before she does anything is she creates like a mood playlist. She's like,
Mm.
what is the music that like evokes the vibe of this world and this sort of idea that I have? And then things
Yeah.
build out from there. So it's like you can start with music, you can draw, you can paint, you can just like watch movies or TV shows that are kind of in sync with the idea that you have. Or if you want to find more inspiration that way, don't confine yourself to just text, even though you're
Mm.
technically an author working within the confines of text, and that
Mm.
extends even farther beyond. Like, just because you've written a story doesn't mean there are other elements that enhance your story, like the package that it comes in, the cover that
Mm.
you present to people, the design of the book on the inside, the way you design and incorporate a map or different aspects like that. Like there are so many ways that you can enhance your story beyond just words, even though you are just a wordsmith.
I love it. And it's so true. I always talk about how, for me, a book is more than just a story. It's a, especially when you're collecting them and you're putting them on your shelves, it's an opportunity to display a piece of artwork beyond the text. So
Exactly.
I thoroughly appreciate that. Well, with that being said, and beautifully said, thank you for sharing that. Um, where can we follow you? Where can people follow you for updates? What's next? Oh, hello. We have.
I'm gonna jump in on this other one, okay?
Okay, hold on. There we go. How's that?
Oh, Google Chrome has been freezing on me. I don't know why. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
I mean, I'm glad that we lasted as long as we did, but I use Google Chrome because Firefox hates my mic and it goes staticky after like 5 minutes.
oh, weird. Okay,
Yeah.
well.
So, but we're at the end. It's okay.
We are. We are. So, where can people follow you and what's coming up next?
So yeah, you can find me on pretty much every social media platform at Adrian M. Gibson. You can find me on my website, adrianmgibson.com. I've got a merch store there with like Mushroom Blues merch, but like other stuff you can buy tattoo designs. If you like a design and want to get it tattooed by someone, the tattoo artist nearest you. Um, you can also check out the Mushroom Blues soundtrack. That's available on Bandcamp digitally, but also in limited edition cassette tape. And it's also on Spotify and different streaming platforms if you want to check it out there. You can listen to the Mushroom Blues Spotify playlist, which is basically like a song per chapter, curated stuff that I listened to while I was writing the book. But there's like 40 songs on there if you want to check it out.
That's
Dr. Love,
fantastic.
big fan of my playlists. And then you can go check out Mushroom Blues, my debut novel. If you're in the mood for a fungal punk murder mystery police procedural with, morally gray world, not necessarily just characters, and lots of fungi, some body horror, and some really genuine moments, and some sort of hallucinatory psychedelic aspects to it as well. So you can get that in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and then you can catch me every week, every Tuesday on SFF Addicts, where MJ and I are chatting with authors and doing writing master classes with them. So you can check all that out. I'm all over the place, but feel free to DM me if you're ever wanting to get in touch.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And all the links for that will be in the description below for anyone watching now or later if you want to check that out and want a quick and easy way of doing that. And thank you so much for the fantastic chat, Adrian. I really appreciate it.
Thank you too. No, I really appreciate it as well. So I'm just very happy. I know like a bunch of the break-ins are in the chat right now, or have been hanging out here and
Yes.
watching. Every time I see their interviews with you, I'm like, okay, I can't wait to chat with Kayla. So I'm just very
I
appreciative. Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. And to everyone watching as well, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your questions, and chatting with us about all the fun stuff like tattoos and mushrooms and
We're going to
all the good
Japan,
things.
Caden and Bo. We're going to
That's it.
Japan. Thank you all for watching.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And as always, take care of yourselves.